Hi, this is Roger Moore, and you're listening to James Bond Radio.
Hello, James Bond Radio listeners, and welcome to part 3 of our review of The World Is Not Enough. My name is Chris Wright, and it's not Chris Sears, it is Chris Wright. And with me, as always, is my good buddy, Mr. Tom Sears. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, mate. I have to tell you a story today. We're gonna be talking about The World Is Not Enough and concluding our review. And then obviously next time we'll be doing the 90-second review so everybody else gets their say. It's just like old times, mate. It's good.
I know, it's great. Good
Today,
feedback.
I've got to tell you a story about how I narrowly, this morning, narrowly avoided a run-in with the local police.
Ooh.
Now, I'm getting out of the shower, right, this morning.
Good start.
And I am, as you might imagine, a little bit in the naked sort of state, you know? And
are you going to go into much detail there, or
No,
is that all we're getting?
That's all you need, really, I suppose.
Right,
Isn't
okay,
it?
good.
The missus, she's gone down the shops earlier, right? So she's not home. I'm walking about by myself, as you do. And as I'm kind of just getting what I'm going to wear out of the cupboard, I hear footsteps on the stairs outside, right? And I hear the jangling of keys. And I assume, that's my lady coming home. So I am about to fling my front door open and go, Dana! Because, that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
You got to keep things fresh when you're, 11 years deep or whatever. You've got to keep them on their toes a little bit, A bit like Kato in the Pink Panther.
Like it.
And then, thankfully, I had a little bit of spider sense just tingled down there. And I thought I best just check. And I looked through the spy hole, and out on the landing is my upstairs neighbour's girlfriend. And she just paused outside our front door just to get her keys out or put her keys away. And that's what I heard. And I tell you what, man, I was a second away from flinging that door open. My hand was on the knob, Chris.
Right.
The doorknob, that is.
Ah.
And I was literally that close to flinging open the door. And then I thought to myself, when I saw her, it was like a lightning bolt through my body. And I thought, what would have happened if I'd have opened that door there? Like, that surely is a call to the local police, isn't it?
Well, I think we'll be recording this from your cell. Can I just ask, when you were going for the moment, would that have been in a James Bond gun barrel pose?
Of course it would have been, yeah. Usually it would be a James Bond gun barrel pose or, like a full-on starfish style, just like a ta-da! But, that's how it goes. So thankfully, I'm not in prison today, and that I narrowly avoided that. Thank God, because that would have been a disaster. I'd have ended up on some kind of list somewhere.
Yeah,
but I didn't. So thank goodness for that. So, Chris,
yes,
on to the topic at hand. The world is not enough. What are you thinking, mate?
Right. Well, part 3, obviously. Just thinking back over parts 1 and 2. I think the first third we were both quite into, and it had a lot of potential, a lot of good stuff. I think the middle third had some good moments, but I do remember there was a couple of things we weren't sure about. Mainly, I think, from the action point of view. But yeah, so obviously coming into the final third, this is it has to be really the most important third of the film, doesn't it? Obviously, you need the first act to get you in, the second act to basically, keep you hooked. But the third act, the climatic battle, and which we normally get in a Bond, and that whole sort of resolution of the story, that needs to be on point, and it has to be super important for it to work. Do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's a funny one because I feel a lot of the time that the last third is often the hardest bit, I reckon, because if you think about it, before you even make a film, you sit down to write it and you come up with some ideas. It would be good if, this is the villain's plan. I've got this good idea for a villain's plan. And, I've got this good idea for this scene here and some bits and bobs. And I feel like all of us as Bond fans and not professional writers have those sorts of ideas floating around our mind all the time. Like I'd love to see Bond and Tanner on the golf course, and that would open up the film, that sort of thing, So that kind of stuff's easy-ish. I won't say easy, but that stuff's the easier part of it, right? But then I feel like once you've constructed the whole thing and you've gone through the flow of what a film needs to be, first act, second act, third act, the third act has to be some kind of action set piece, right? Pretty much always. And that is all too easy to just fall into sort of generic running and shooting and jumping and crashes and bangs and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's difficult to keep that stuff fresh at this stage of the game not even just in the Bondian stage of the game, I mean in the stage of all action films, to keep that thrilling and fresh. Because, even crappy sort of B-rate Steven Seagal action movies.
That's a bit high for
I suppose it is. Even those have like big set piece moments and all the rest of it. So it's like, how do you keep that fresh? And I think, obviously that was a lot of people's major complaint about Spectre, is that, that last bit was just a little bit, rough around the edges, or a lot rough around the edges, if as the case may be. But like, that is a tricky thing. I think it's easy-ish to come up with the premise of the film and the general vibe of what's going to happen. But the climax of the film, how do you make what is usually mindless action into something interesting? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think ultimately a lot of that is to do with the main villain, the story behind the main villain, what we've seen between Bond and not just the main villain, but the main villain's plot. Obviously, that's basically every Bond film story revolves around the plot of the main villain, doesn't it? In terms of their plan, their scheme, that is the story, and how Bond sort of gets involved and ultimately sort of defeats it. That's that is the whole film. So I think that is a major point. And if you're not engaged or involved, that's where things get tricky. But if you're sort of hyped up about it, and you're, sometimes we know how it's going to end for the majority, but it's nice to have a few twists and turns along the way. And if you can be surprised in a good way, then, you're on the way to a cracking film, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So we will, as we said before, we'll be concluding our World Is Not Enough review today. And then obviously next week, now is the time for you to send in your 90-second review. So obviously go to jamesbondradio.com, click send a voicemail. It's over on the right-hand side of the page. And in 90 seconds or less, let us know what you think of The World Is Not Enough, because we're always interested to hear your thoughts on that. And that includes... JBR has the manifesto of positivity. We don't like to shit on Bond. We like to celebrate Bond in all its forms. But that does not mean you cannot acknowledge at least the negative side. So even if you're not a fan of this film and you don't like it, even if you think, Christmas Jones is the worst Bond girl ever, or even if you don't like Pierce and he's not your bag, get involved. Let us know what you think. And you will appear on next week's episode. So make sure you do that sharpish. Now, before we crack on, Chris, this is going back a few weeks now, obviously. You made a little pilgrimage for New Year's, didn't you? Which we forgot to talk about last time, which was to Connery's homeland. So tell me about that. It
was indeed, yeah. It's the first time I've been to Edinburgh. And I honestly, I fell in love with the city straight away. It is a magical place, man. You've basically got these sort of old school buildings everywhere. And in the centre of the city is like an extinct volcano with a castle on top. Now that's quite Bondian as it is.
Is that so? Mate, I've never been to Scotland at all, which is quite shameful. I didn't know that. It's built on a volcano.
Basically, yeah. The Edinburgh Castle's on an extinct volcano, and there's another one which you can like walk up as well, which is even taller, called Arthur's Seat, which I did, and the view from there over the city is fantastic. But yeah, obviously that's where Connery was born back in 1930, and I found out there was a little plaque sort of dedicated to Sean, and Fountain Bridge was a place where he was born and grew up sort of in the early years. Obviously, it's changed a load since then. And there's a quite funny story actually. I saw a little article about it when the plaque was unveiled, and obviously Connery was there and everything. And apparently he got a taxi ride, and on the way there, he sort of kept pointing out the names of the roads. And the taxi driver was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. How come you sort of know all these roads?" And Connery replied saying, "Oh, well, I used to be a milkman around here back in the day." And the taxi driver said, "Oh, wow, okay. So what do you do now?" And Connery said that was a bit harder to explain.
Good God. Do you know what? It's funny. So over the Christmas period, some of Catherine's friends came to visit for a couple of days from Sweden. And bit younger than us, so they're like sort of mid-20s, 25 and 27, I think they were. And just in general chit-chat, the podcast came up in conversation, as it sometimes does. Usually where my missus will say, "He's such a geek, look what he does in his spare time." And then it all comes out. And I was just telling them about the podcast, and I said, yeah, it was amazing, blah, blah, blah. We've done it for a few years now. And, we even had Roger Moore on. And they looked totally blank at me. They went, who?
Oh,
Who's
no.
that?
Seriously.
And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
They're from the same land as Anders from Sweden with Love. So, they should be clued up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I schooled them a little bit.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I took them to school and
Nice.
and yeah, but it's shocking, isn't it? Does that make you feel old, man?
Well-
Because we're getting to that point now, aren't we? Where like the kids these days, man, don't know what the fuck they're doing, do they?
Yeah. Well, I think it's not just the age thing, because obviously there is that. But equally, I think being British, you must have heard of Connery and Roger Moore and all that. I'm sure people growing up here, maybe they don't. Maybe it's the same in the UK. Obviously, Sweden is a bit further, sort of not quite as connected to that whole area, so it might be partly that. But yeah, that's you must have had your mouth open when they said that.
Certainly did, yeah, absolutely. But they promised me that they were going to watch some Bond after they went home.
Nice.
She actually said that she'd never seen a Bond film, so I'm like, this needs to change immediately.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because over the last 3 or 4 months now, I've been taking someone to school who had never seen any of the Bonds, and my good lady friend, and we watched Casino Royale only a couple of days ago, and it got rave reviews. So I'm really happy about that.
Very nice. What's the layout so far? So what has been seen? Because you're doing it randomly, aren't you?
Randomly with one or two, ones that put in for certain measures. So the first one was Quantum of Solace, which got a thumbs up. A couple of things not too sure about. Wasn't a fan of Strawberry Fields and one or two other little things, but overall decent enough. From Russia with Love, we watched. Never Say Never Again, we watched.
Whoa.
Skyfall, and then Spectre we watched, and I don't think we've seen any others since then. So loads to go. It's like one a month, basically.
So let me ask you this.
Oh, and Majesties, obviously. Majesties
Very
for
nice.
Christmas, yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What has been her least favourite so far?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I don't like the female side of things, female characters in the older Bond films. It are not the way that certain things are portrayed is not in a really good light. So it is difficult. I think from Russia with Love, there were certain scenes which didn't go down well. Overall, the film was looked upon not too bad, but I think certain things, when they're seen, take the rest of away from the rest of the film. Do you know what I mean? If it's like,
Was it when he gives her a little slap in the train?
There is definitely part of that.
That's to be expected, isn't it? Really, because those were the context of the times. Even Draco would chin his own daughter, wouldn't he? In those days.
Well, this is it.
So it's like not nice, obviously, and certainly you or I would never partake in that sort of behaviour. But Connery would, doesn't he? He was fond of that, giving him a little slap if they.
And George as well when he grabbed her arm and stuff. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so there was a bit of that, but it's an interesting journey. So it'll be good to see how it goes over the next few months as well.
Right. Nicely done. All right, cool. Now I tell you something that pleases me before we get cracking with the film review, Chris. Something that pleases me. You've been messaging me a lot lately about your Bondian fires are burning again, aren't they? I'm very pleased with that news. Yeah,
definitely. Well, it's a bit like the end of Quantum of Solace, I've never been away type thing. It's always been there, but I don't know, like I know No Time to Die is just around the corner.
Yeah. And
I've still managed to keep on the download. I might have seen one or two pictures and stuff like that, but I've really managed to keep it, as bare as I can in terms of knowing stuff about it. But I know it's only a few weeks away. It's almost within touching distance now, and that's got me super excited. And obviously watching the films with the lady friend as well, and it's just burning, man. It's just, I know I've messaged you like 30 times sort of recently about everything, but it feels good to be back. And there's lots of stuff to look forward to. We're sort of talked quite a bit about future JBR meetups this year, and hopefully, I think it's all going ahead, but potentially the French premiere of No Time to Die, which will be amazing. And then I think we're going to try and do one around Nene Valley in the summer, maybe June, July time, and perhaps a trip to Vienna sort of September, October. So there's lots of stuff to look forward to.
Lots of fun to be had.
Yeah, definitely.
2020, the year of Bond, man. I think we must take a moment for everybody listening at home, to just savor this moment, because we are on the run up now to a fresh Bond film. How long have we been waiting for this, man? Do you remember all those years in the middle where it was like, we've got to have some news soon. They're going to have to start something soon. By the summer we'll hear, and then Christmas will be around the corner, and we still haven't heard anything. And it just went on and on and on. How fortunate we are to be in a point where we've got all this excitement to come this year, a brand new Bond film, and all of that stuff. It's the most magical time, For football fans, it's all about the World Cup, isn't it? It's like every 4 years you get this major event that everybody goes apeshit for. And for us, it used to be every other year. But now it's kind of like the same thing, isn't it? It's every 4 or 5 years we get a Bond film lately. And so it's an extra special event. So I think we all need to just pause for a moment, have a moment's silence to reflect on that, wouldn't you say?
I'm just having my moment's silence.
I'll play the theme tune while you're having a moment of silence. All right, should we get cracking then?
Yeah, definitely, man. Let's do it. Let's get into part 3.
Who are you?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British hand up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to lie.
All right, so where did we leave Bond last time then, Chris?
Okay, so last time we left Bond and Christmas Jones. They'd just been in the pig, in the pipeline. And obviously the bomb had exploded, but they'd got off. And then basically Bond was saying to Christmas Jones, there's one element that he might have forgotten about, which was caviar, which is basically Zhukovsky. So that's the last thing that we saw. And the next scene is Maiden's Tower in Istanbul. So we have Renard, who's coming to see Elektra King. What do you think of Maiden's Tower as sort of a Bond location, in terms of, it's kind of like Elektra King's? So we've seen her sort of palacey sort of headquarters, her palacey type home that she had before. And this is more of her hideout, secret sort of base type thing. What do you think of Maiden's Tower?
I like it. Whenever I see any sort of like little island with a building on it, I immediately think Bond villain. There's a place in Newquay in Cornwall, which is, I remember when it went up for sale last time, it was on the front page of the newspaper saying Bond villain's lair for sale. And it basically, when you go down to the beach at Newquay, there is this rock that kind of sticks up, and there's just one house on it, and there's like a garden surrounding it, and then there's like a drawbridge that goes across to the mainland, and it just looks so Bond villain like. And if you're sitting on the beach, it's right there, you see it. What a rad.
I know the place you're talking about, because I've surfed there quite a few times, and just imagine, like, as soon as I laid eyes on it, I just thought, God, imagine living there and like having to walk across this bridge. Like, it's quite high up as well, isn't it, over the beach and everything, just to get to your home. And you would feel like a Bond villain. I think you'd have to proper style it out in a sort of a Bond villain type layout.
Certainly would, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
My fledgling rock trio used to play in the Cooler Club, right opposite that house back in the day. It's
nice.
going back about 50 years ago. Jesus Christ. I'm an old man. Cool. All right then. So she's got her little mini, tower. There she is.
Yep.
Renard arrives on his little boat, and they have a little cuddle.
Yep.
And he gets his plutonium out and shows it to her, and gets her to touch her destiny, and all the rest of it. And then they go and visit M in captivity. Now, do you want to know what my first thought about M in captivity is?
Go for it.
Obviously, that's the storyline in Colonel Sun. So I'm like, I remember when this came out, I was like, ooh, that's a little bit Colonel Sunny. But that's not what I originally think. That's what I think is, when I look at Judy's little prison cell there through the bars, I notice that they've not left her any facilities whatsoever. So by the end of this, by the time Bond shows up, she must be busting for a pee.
Yeah.
And that's not very nice, is it?
No, that's it. And no food or water, I don't think they gave her, did they? So, not quite like the prisons in the UK, where I think she would have been
probably looked after.
Yeah, this is it. But yeah, no, it's quite a cool little scene this. So obviously, Elektra has something, says she has something for Renard. They go and see M. And I found, watching it this time, which I'm probably thought about before, I think there's quite a bit of similarity between Renard and Silver in terms of their outlook on M.
Yeah.
Because obviously Silver thought M betrayed him, which he did in a way. And so he had that sort of revenge. He wanted that revenge against her. And I guess in a way, Renard, M had sent 009 to execute him, which obviously he didn't do properly, but obviously he got the killing off the senses. And I think there's that little parallel there, which I thought was quite a cool thing.
Yeah, I suppose the difference is there. It's funny, I've never thought that before until I watched it the last time. And then that thought did jump into my head just in this particular scene as well. So it's funny you say that. But I think when you look at the Silver situation, right, if you're going to work as a spy, there has to be that element of understanding where it's like, okay, we're going to send you to do this thing, but we have to deny all knowledge if you get caught. Half of the course has got to be done. That's how Bond ends up in North Korea for 9 months.
With the old sewer suit beside pillars.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right? So you have to understand that. Silver obviously didn't understand that. He wanted the rescue mission or whatever. And then this one is a bit more devious, isn't it? Because it's like, M was a bit naughty here, wasn't she, using her as bait? So it's one of those things where when you're in M's position, there are some very difficult grey area choices. People these days like to think that the world is a black and white world. It's either this or it's that. Very polarized and extreme, one thing or the other. But something like M has to do things that are kind of like, well, this is for the greater good, but this is also a bad thing that I have to do to potentially achieve that greater good. There's some interesting moral quandaries in there for a character like that. And you can see, like we talked about, I think it was last time, about where she talks about every instinct as a mother and all that kind of stuff. And that really humanizes her, doesn't it? And you can see she knows the responsibility on her shoulders of what she's got to achieve, but at the same time, there's a guilt that's eating away at her inside as well.
Yeah, well, this is it. Obviously, Renard says so in the scene, doesn't he? He sort of says it wasn't he that ruined Elektra, it was M for allowing her to stay with Renard for such a long time, obviously not pay off the ransom and not get her father to pay off the ransom. And that's got to eat inside M, that's got to make her feel, guilty, like you said, and it's not an easy job by any means what she's done. Yeah. But then it links into obviously Renard saying that since 009 was sent after him, he's been watching time, his life slowly tick away and everything. Now he says he's going to give her the same pleasure, puts that little clock on the stool for M to watch, and by noon tomorrow, she's going to be a goner. So I think that's quite a nice little mini revenge on the way type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Chris.
Yes.
Next up, we go to Elektra's bedroom, don't we? Goodness gracious me. We've got Renard and Elektra in bed together.
Yeah.
And this, what do you think of this scene? Because this is, I suppose, like your romantic scene between the villain. Like, it's a tricky one to define this.
How many times have we seen that sort of a villain? Obviously, we've seen Zorin and Mayday, haven't we?
Yeah.
There's not many times we see the main villain in bed, or at least sort of.
Well, that's it. So I tell you why I stumbled there is because you look at the posters and you think Renard is the main villain, and then you kind of look at this and he sort of is and he sort of isn't, in the sense that he sort of created the nasty Elektra back in the day. She got the old Stockholm syndrome or whatever. And it's kind of like she seems to wield all the power now, doesn't she? You know what I mean? He's almost like a henchman to her. But at the same time, they're in bed together and they're lovers. So it's a bit of like you say, you don't see that every time, do you? But at the same time, it's like, goodness gracious me, you're in bed with Elektra, clearly one of the world's most beautiful ladies. And, you get the sense that Renard doesn't really know what he's doing, does he?
This is your point. You hit the nail on the head there. I think this is the scene that really shows how much in control Elektra is, and that without a shadow of a doubt, she is the one in charge. She's taunting Renard. He sort of says, "Oh, how beautiful and smooth and warm her skin is." She's like, "Well, how do you know?" She's probably having a go at him, and then Renard sort of asks about Bond. Oh, is Bond a good lover? She's like, "Well, what do you think?" And she's completely and utterly putting him down. And so this is a scene, without a doubt, where you're like, right, Elektra is the one on top.
So this is,
speaking,
this is an interesting thought then, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, he takes her captive. She gets Stockholm syndrome and falls in love with him. But now, so he's totally in the power, a higher status character in that situation. But now the roles have reversed. So it will be interesting to learn the story of how things changed over time. So I guess at some point he fell in love with her as well, and then that's it, isn't it?
Without a doubt, yeah. She obviously used her body and her manipulative powers, but talking about certain aspects to the story in this film, that is one which I think works so well. I think the power that Elektra King has comes across so clearly and brilliantly, and it's intriguing. We've had nothing like that before in terms of a storyline where obviously the captive manages to turn the tables, and I think the character of Elektra King is fantastic. And that whole turning.
And I tell you what, amazing casting as well.
Yeah,
you believe that shit, don't you? You believe she can get any man on the planet to do whatever she wants. I feel like if I was to be stood in front of Elektra King, I wouldn't even be able to get a sentence out. She's that beautiful. You know what I mean?
Well, she needs to be, because this is the woman who takes Bond. She manipulates Bond, and she needs to have that. How many women has Bond been with? Beautiful women, everything like this. She needed to be absolute top drawer, top level in terms of looks, in terms of intelligence, in terms of intensity, manipulative powers. She needs to be that for that character to work. And Sophie Marceau and her interpretation, right up there. It's so good.
There's a line in your notes here that I'm a big fan of.
I know what it's going to be.
It says, Renard punches through the glass, but he can't feel anything. Elektra removes the shards of glass and rubs ice over his hand. He still can't feel anything. So she shoves the ice cube in his hand up her beaver.
Which is true.
I love it. Yeah.
So, but again, this is her taking control, isn't it?
Yeah.
Surely you know about pleasure or whatever it is, and wants to pleasure herself. Uses him to do it, I guess.
Well, that's it. I suppose that captivity moment from that we don't see in the past is what makes her. In this, that's her her Batman moment, in the sense that you remember there's that line where she says she seduced the guards and then escaped. Like, that's, I guess, where the switch happened, where she realizes that that's where her power is.
Without a doubt, yeah. And when that line earlier, like you said, I remember in one of the previous part 1 and part 2, where Bond described her as sexually inexperienced. It's like, hell no. Like, where's that come from?
There is no way. She has an aura about her where you just know she knows what she's doing. There's like, if you said that about Cara Malovi, totally get it.
Exactly.
Definitely. Not this time. Absolutely no way do I believe.
So then we sort of see into like a nice little short scene with M. So she's back in her sort of cell. The clock's there, and she realizes she's still got the locator card from the nuclear warhead in her pocket. And we don't quite know what she's trying to do yet, although people might have a clue. But she's trying to hook that stool to bring it closer to her. Obviously, she wants this clock. The stool falls and the clock goes away, and then obviously that's her mini plan to go through with. And so that's just we don't see M for quite a long time after that, because I remember seeing that scene thinking, right, when's she going to come back and get the clock? I haven't seen this film for quite a while, and I kind of forgotten. It took a long time to get back to M, so I guess after that, she only just, she had no other idea, so obviously you had to just wait it out until the next morning, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, after that, obviously, we go to Zhukovsky's caviar factory. Now, I tell you what I'm kind of picking vibes up as the further I go through this film is we mentioned this before. Obviously, this is very much in like a Roger territory. Like it gives me Spy Who Loved Me vibes, basically. In the sense that it's a very sort of it's obviously a light-hearted film, and it's leaning towards the fantastical and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, when you see Zhukovsky's new look and the way he sort of carries himself and stuff, he's got that little cartoonish flavour to him. Maybe not that they're similar characters, but in the same way that you've got, say, a J.W. Pepper or somebody like that, who's definitely there for laughs. He's got that flavour about him, which I like.
Even more so in this film, I think.
Big time. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, like you do get the sense that Zhukovsky in GoldenEye was a threat. Like the way he shoots the gun right between his legs and all the rest of it, and Bond's like, all right, okay, it's all right, which you don't see from Bond very often. In this case, he's all for laughs. I don't find him a threat at all. He's a very sort of submissive to Bond, I think, in a lot of ways. I think so,
yeah, definitely. Well, I guess you can kind of see it a bit in this particular scene. So obviously Zhukovsky and Christmas Jones, they arrive at the caviar factory in his Rolls, and there's a little moment before they actually go into the factory where Mr. Bullion's in the car and he clocks Bond Z8, and then he gets on the phone and on the blower, and obviously he then informs Elektra King Bond's alive, and she then informs Renard.
Yeah.
So that's the first time. Obviously Bullion's always been a bit sketchy, but that's the first time that we know that he's actually working for Elektra and not for Zhukovsky. And then he doesn't arrive with Christmas Jones. Zhukovsky arrives with Bullion and his goons, but then when he goes into the factory, that's when he sees Christmas Jones.
That's
and
right.
He's a little bit distracted.
And do you know what that reminds me of?
Go on.
That reminds me of Octopussy in the pre-title sequence where she drives along beside the Jeep, and like the guard on the back of the Jeep's kind of looking at her, and she's like lifting her skirt up. You know what I mean? It's that similar thing, isn't it? It's that old action movie thing that doesn't happen anymore, where you send the attractive lady in first, and then the guard goes, "Oh, it's an attractive lady," as a distraction. Then Bond steps in and punches him out. You know what I mean? It's that little thing.
Well, straight away I was thinking of The Living Daylights, in the scene with Pushkin and the woman in front. But yeah, it's exactly that sort of thing, isn't it? And so then Bond, he basically grabs Zhukovsky, doesn't he? Puts him under gunpoint and asks him about his sort of relationship with Elektra, and you get quite a few nice one-liners from Zhukovsky here, and he basically says, "Oh, I thought you were the one giving her the business," and all that sort of stuff, which I thought was quite nice. And obviously Bond mentions then the $1 million at the casino, and he knows it's payoff. The way that Zhukovsky didn't react and the way that Elektra King didn't react, he was suspicious about it, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And basically that's the information. He wants to know what is the link between him and Elektra. And Zhukovsky's pretty hesitant, isn't he? He doesn't want to obviously divulge anything. But while this is going on, we can hear these helicopters, and it's getting super loud. And obviously we know something's about to happen. And then suddenly you get this column of like buzzsaws just slicing through the warehouse thing. Now visually, these are pretty sort of extraordinary. It's not something you have seen before, is it?
No. So what you obviously you do see them earlier on in the film, don't you? When they go check out the pipeline. So
which is
that
nice.
Little seed is planted.
Yeah,
because if they came out of nowhere, it would be a bit like, what the hell's going on here? But the fact that we've seen them is a nice little touch, And I do like. So I suppose when I see something like the Parahawk sequence, I'm kind of like, okay, that's a very stylized Bondian thing. Those things aren't really a thing that you see. You know what I mean? And then I guess these aren't a thing that you'd see there, but they are actually real things. Like you will see those in the real world, trimming trees or whatever over long distances and all the rest of it. So that is a thing, which is nice. So they've obviously, now Elektra knows Bond's alive. She sent her helicopter, razor men or whatever you call them, razor men, to go and sort him out and chop up Zhukovsky's gaff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what do you think about this sequence? I tell you, there's something I really do like about it.
Yeah.
Would you like to know what that is?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Get some Bond theme in there.
You've got to love a bit of Bond theme, definitely. So this is another, in terms of the action set pieces, it's definitely one that you'll remember, I think, because of the way, obviously, with the helicopters. It's something that sticks in the memory, isn't it? Again, it's something kind of quite original. So basically, Bond tries to start shooting the helicopters, and while he tells Zhukovsky and Christmas Jones to sort of make their getaway, and then you've got people in the chopper sort of firing guns and shooting missiles. There's lots of flames going off. You see Bond, doing a roll down the stairs, a bit similar to the one in GoldenEye, down the satellite, and running around and jumping around a lot. And it's a bit chaotic, which obviously it needs to be. But do you think the level of threat is definitely there, or do you think it's almost verging on the comic?
It's definitely on the comic side. Yeah, it's definitely like it's definitely that. I mean, I suppose when you get that sequence where he jumps in the car and then obviously the car gets cut in half, and it's another one of those of like, oh, it's another Pierce car that we don't get to see it really do anything. It's the second time we've had that. And I suppose they straddled it, didn't they? It's like GoldenEye, no car action. Tomorrow Never Dies, big time car action.
Yeah.
World Is Not Enough, no car action. Die Another Day, big time car action. So maybe that's what they were thinking, just to kind of mix things up a little bit. But yeah, it is that you do get some. It feels like a sort of. It feels a bit choreographed, I would say. This, do you know what I mean? Because you do get some cool shots. Like there's that shot of Bond running with the blades right behind him, chopping up the path behind him, and all that kind of stuff. So you do see that. I'm not sure this scene is aged that well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels a bit studio set to me.
I think it almost, and it kind of looks a bit that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think there are moments, the moment where he sort of remote controls a Z8 towards him, he gets in, and then he fires his own missile at the helicopter. He does the biggest smirk I think I've ever seen. Brosnan, he's got a couple of facial expressions which he does quite a few times, and that smirk is spot on the money.
We discussed that briefly before. I think that is his eyebrow. Roger's eyebrow. I think Pierce's smirk is what gets me. I think that's a big part of what gets me so excited about Pierce. It really is. It's like that. Fucking one of my favorite lines in GoldenEye, man. Valentin Dmitrovich Zhukovsky. I gave him the limp. He gives it a little fucking smirk. I get excited. That thing and that whole interaction with Xenia in the casino at the beginning about I enjoy a woman pulling rank and all that kind of stuff. There's so much just bubbling under the surface there with just that little smirk, and I love it. You're absolutely right. I do like a Brosnan smirk. And
then Zhukovsky gets his own one in when after obviously the Z8 gets sliced in half. I think he likes the fact that Bond's car's mashed up, so I think he's sort of he's quite happy with that. So there was one bit though that I wasn't 100% sure about. So he's sort of running along the caviar factory, and he gets a crowbar, puts a crowbar over sort of cable or a wire or something, and then slides down to the Bond music going. Now in my notes, I'll tell you what I put. What do you think of this bit? It feels like something from Home Alone to me. And I do kind of get that thing. It's almost, I know maybe it's being a bit overcritical, but it's almost like anyone could do that. Just putting a crowbar off something and sliding down, Macaulay Culkin could have done that when he was 10 or whatever. And the way that the Bond music sort of is, like we said in part 2, where he does the James Bond, and the Bond music sort of plays up on it, and it does the same on this little moment. And I don't think that is a cool enough moment or an exciting enough moment to be like, let's play the Bond theme. This is brilliant, because it's anyone can do that. The Bond music needs to be played when Bond is being fucking cool or doing something outrageous. And
so here's my thoughts on that. Here's my rule of the Bond theme is I want it all the time. I don't think you can overuse it. Right? Yeah. One of the things I adore about Tomorrow Never Dies, and even in this one, is Bond is walking down the street and you just get as he's walking along the street. I could watch Bond walk down the street all day with that playing. Like I'll get bored of him walking down the street if it's not playing. Right? Let's trim that bit down a bit. I don't need to see him walking for 10 minutes. But if that song is playing, that music is playing, I could sit there and watch that all day and I'd be happy as Larry. There's something magical about that. And I know what you're saying. I don't think you can overuse it. I want to hear it every 5 minutes. I don't think it cheapens it. I don't think it sort of, I just don't think you can overuse it. It's that powerful, right? I think in in terms of Casino Royale, that was a masterful thing to not use it and bring it in at just that moment, just to be, he puts on his, his jacket for the first time, and you just get those little notes. Then you save it for the very end of the film, where there it is. There's the immortal line. Beautifully done. Couldn't be done any better. Perfect. In a case like this, world is not enough. I want the Bond theme every 5 seconds. And like we said at the very beginning, when it opens up and he's got the glasses on walking across the street, you got Bond theme straight away. Brilliant. Love it. Where I think I go, is when it's used at not such a good moment. And you've illustrated 2 of them. 3 of them immediately spring to mind. So Bond, James Bond. That I don't like that. Don't like it at all. Obviously, the parasailing sequence in Die Another Day, because that is such a ridiculous looking thing, the fact that the Bond theme is playing, which suggests it is a cool moment, makes it even worse. And that's horrible. And I think, sliding down the cables, it's just, I guess, a bit cheap. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like, anyway, that's not a Bond moment. There are Bond moments where Bond does something really fucking cool that nobody else could pull off. That's when the Bond theme is in at its absolute best moment. End of Casino Royale, the name's Bond, James Bond. Nobody else, when they say their name on screen, has that power. You know what I mean? So you stick the Bond theme in there, brilliant, game on, let's have that. I think back to the Goldfinger sequence where he walks out to Tilly Masterson and says his name and the Bond theme's kicking in. I think to Dr. No, he says his name and the Bond theme kicks in, game on. Sliding down a cable with a crowbar, I'm like, I don't think that moment was special enough to sort of punctuate that moment with the Bond theme. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, totally agree. But so, what are your thoughts overall on this as an action set? We've had the Parahawks, we had the brilliant boat chase, part 1. We had the nuclear bunker one, which we think probably could have been done a bit better or a bit more exciting.
Yeah.
Overall, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's visually exciting. Those helicopters are something we've not seen before. So, like, in terms of an action sequence, so that's cool. I feel it feels a bit choreographed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's another shot, for example, where half of the building falls off. Bond's in the spotlight with the gun shooting.
Oh,
you know
yeah,
that one?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Which is kind of cool because that almost makes me think of the gun barrel. You know what I mean? That's very Bond-like. And then he sort of does this jump off and all the rest of it. And I don't know, it feels to me a bit like, okay, we want to get this cool shot of him running here with all the boards coming out behind, so let's get that and stick that there. We want to get this bit where, it just feels, it doesn't feel like a seamless, natural action sequence. It feels a bit choreographed. That's all I can say about it.
I think so. But there are obviously quite a few plus points to it. And I think Zhukovsky's sort of presence and the humour is pretty good. There's that moment where he's trying to get away, reversing in the rolls with Christmas Jones, and the helicopters just slice that walkway, and the rolls falls down into the water. And then after Bond, he sort of releases some gas, doesn't he, and shoots a flare gun, and then the helicopter goes up, and that's obviously a pretty cool moment. Yeah. But as it explodes, then you get this definite CGI of all these buzzsaws sort of flying towards the screen. Yes. It's almost like, one of those films that have been made for 3D sort of thing with those saws, and I think it's got that sort of feel to it. And then you got that moment, it's, one hits in the wall and almost catches Zhukovsky, and Zhukovsky ends up in this sort of tub of caviar, whatever it is.
I do like, as much as I dislike CGI, I do like that moment where he comes bursting through the door and just takes a dive into all the caviar, and they just narrowly miss him left, right, and centre. That's I feel some peril there,
Yeah, definitely. And then it's in a good. I like that whole bit where Bond is there and he could easily help him, but he's like, "Well, hang on a minute. You've got information. I want to know about Elektra," and the fact that Zhukovsky could, hoisted by his own petard, drown in his own caviar. That's kind of cool. I like that. And then he basically, obviously, lets him know about his nephew Nikolai, who's agreed to bring in some machine equipment. Does he mention the sub then, or does he mention it later? I think he might mention it later. Excuse me.
Can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah.
So there is that smuggling machinery, I think it is, and then Mr. Bullion turns up, and I do like Zhukovsky's sort of line on him. Then he's like, "You, where have you been, you gold-encrusted buffoon?"
Yeah,
and that's a good put down, I think. And
I like it.
And then Bull obviously tries to help Zhukovsky out, and the whole factory just obviously falls apart. And he's like, "Oh, the insurance company is never going to believe this." Which is quite a nice line, I think.
How do you feel about Bond's line of "Q's not gonna like this"?
Yeah, it's all right, isn't it? It goes with the film. It goes with the moment, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. All right then. So after that, we're back to Maiden's tower, and this is obviously where the submarine is approaching underneath the boat there as it's coming in. And then obviously we go back to the Federal Security Bureau, former KGB safe house with Bond, Christmas, Zhukovsky and Bullion. So we're in Istanbul still, where they're searching for Zhukovsky's nephew in the sub. So he must have mentioned it at that point. Yeah, you're right, absolutely. They have a little bit of story for us. Bond makes some discoveries. The sub is nuclear, so they put 2 and 2 together. Christmas says that putting the weapons-grade plutonium in the sub's reactor would cause an instant catastrophic meltdown. Well done, Christmas. He's done well there. I was about to say the same, yeah. And then Bond explains to let us all know at home that the explosion would destroy Istanbul and the 3 competing oil pipelines, leaving the King pipeline the only viable route to the west. What a devious plot. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it's just informing everyone, if they haven't been kept up to date, with things, just exactly how bad and dastardly this plot is, and obviously Elektra ultimately wants her pipeline to be the only pipeline so she can make a shit ton of money, which a lot of them like to do. Yeah,
absolutely. So flashback to the submarine pen. Renard goes to take some brandy and refreshments for his men. They've obviously got something nasty in there because they all end up dead in a few minutes. But there we go. And then this is where sort of M leaps into action a little bit. She goes to visit M and says, "What's the time?" She puts the clock on the cell door. "It's time for you to die," which I think is her sort of like, I mean, it's obvious, but "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die" moment, isn't it? That's a very Bond villain line, isn't it? And it's almost like the title of the new Bond film as well, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
time for you to die, no time to die.
And then obviously she buggers off. M gets the battery out of the phone, connects the thing so the signal can be seen. And then, of course, we go back to the safe house and their signal comes. Bond sort of pinpoints where she is at Maiden's tower. And then now this bit, right?
Yeah.
I was surprised at this. So obviously Bullion does his little scuttles away out the door. Bond clocks the suitcase. Bomb! And then they go to jump. But like, if you look at that shot, there's a shot where they all run. So you've got Zhukovsky, Bond, and Christmas. They all run and dive towards the camera as the explosion goes off just behind them. That's right there. Like that's not a stuntman moment. That is that. And you look how close that explosion is behind them. It's not unlike Man with the Golden Gun when they're escaping from Scaramanga's base as it's blowing up. You remember when they just narrowly made it around the corner and the flames all came out and all the rest of it. And like super close. It feels like it's almost that close. Did you pick up on that? Did you notice that?
No, not necessarily. I think I assumed it would have been stunt people, but I guess I wasn't taking it in. But it probably was them. Because
I paused. I thought it was actually them. Paused it and watched it back a couple of times, and it's definitely them.
Oh, okay.
Taking a run and jump. I don't know if there's any camera trickery in there. Further
Probably
away
in terms
from
of the flames and everything. There must be something along there.
But it looks bang on. I was very impressed with that.
Nice. Yeah, good stuff. And I do. It's cool because then Bond basically chases after Bullion, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Now this bit, even when I first saw the film, like he sort of goes around this corner and then he's suddenly under gunpoint. Gabor is there, obviously. Bullion is there, and then a few other dudes who, aside from Gabor and Mr. Bullion, they do look like your average everyday person. There's not very many. I wouldn't be frightened of the other guys that were there. It's a strange sort of band of people. Really. Yeah,
I suppose Gabor is your sort of like he's got your henchman flavour to him, doesn't he? He's got a look, and he's obviously a muscular dude, so you wouldn't want to mess with him. But yeah, I guess the other ones are just sort of like run of the mill dodgy dudes, aren't they? You know what I mean?
that's
You
it.
know, you probably find them selling dodgy camcorder recorded films out of the back of their van at the market on the weekend. You know what I mean? They look like those kinds of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then next up, we go back to the sort of submarine pen, and we see Nikolai and all of his men are dead. Renard then steals Nikolai's hat, which is quite an important point. Obviously, his captain's hat, which comes into the story later on. And he basically tells his men to throw sort of dead bodies into the sea. One of them says it will take him half an hour to set up the machine to make the plutonium rod. So this is, I mean, for everyday people, you're not going to know about nuclear reactors and plutonium rods and stuff like that, are you?
No.
So what we know is, what we've been informed is, half that plutonium is enough, weapons-grade plutonium, it's enough to cause a nuclear catastrophic meltdown if it's sort of put into the subs reactor. So we kind of have that to sort of go on. And I guess this is just sort of giving you a bit of a half an hour, so you know there's that amount of time, basically.
Yeah.
It's giving you that whole countdown thing that they do in films, isn't it?
I've noticed at the end of this film, there is a lot of stuff we're being told, you know, like all that kind of stuff. Like
exposition heavy.
Yeah, like when we get to the submarine sequence, there's a lot of, if we put this thing over here and we press that switch and then that comes up, then I can go out through here, and then if that doesn't happen, you've got to go through this hatch, and then blah, blah, blah. It's a lot to keep track of. You know what I mean? There's a lot going on, which is an interesting, easily missed, I guess, some of that stuff.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously Bond and Christmas are prisoners. They're brought to the Maiden's tower. Renard tells Elektra that the reactor is secured and everything is ready. Now, this scene I really like. Okay, so basically, this is Renard saying that everything that Elektra wanted is set up and ready to go. And this is him telling the audience that he's so much in love with her that he's willing to sacrifice himself for her scheme.
Yeah.
Basically, it's similar, I guess, to Odd Job in Fort Knox. You know, he could have, you know, he didn't want the guy to leave. He was loyal enough to stay in Fort Knox, knowing he was going to kill him, basically. And this is a similar bit with Renard. He's willing to cause this catastrophic meltdown, killing himself, all for Elektra, which just shows the power that she has over him. So I think this is a really, really nice scene here between the two of them. And so Renard basically says, then this is the end. And Elektra says, no, this is the beginning. And you can really see in this scene how much Renard has fallen for Elektra. And he sort of says, the future is yours, have fun with it. And gives her Nikolai's captain's hat. And then walks off knowing that he's never going to see her again. And I think both characters, both Robert Carlyle and Sophie Marceau in this scene, really nailed that sort of dynamic between the two characters here.
I tell you what, mate, she is that beautiful. I would probably do the same thing.
Well, I think everyone would. Yeah, too right.
Yeah. Now, torture chair sequence, Chris.
Yes.
Now, with how Elektra looks in this scene, I would happily sit in that chair and have her turn that wheel as many times as she wants, mate.
Yeah.
Good God.
That dress, whoever designed that, was it who would have done the...
Lindy Hemming, is that what you're going to say?
I think it was Lindy Hemming, yeah. But that dress is absolutely stunning. And on Sophie Marceau, obviously, looks incredible. And she is, without doubt, one of the most beautiful of the Bond girls. And she has to be, and it is because of the role, because of what that character is. She needed to be like that and have that power. But like you said earlier, you believe it, you know, not flip the roles a bit and put Denise Richards in that role, and you wouldn't believe it, would you? Okay, no, she's an attractive woman, definitely.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't feel that any man would do anything for her. Whereas Sophie Marceau just knew that, you know, the manipulation she had over Bond.
Yeah.
You knew it was true.
It's a breathtaking beauty, is what that is. You just like, good God, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are no words. I can't describe how beautiful she is. It's just, oh my God. And that, like we said before, man, there is something magical about the French lady that just, I don't know what they've got over there, but it's something magical. It really is.
It's Evian water, I think, isn't it?
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah. It's truly magical, and she's got everything wrapped up in one little fantastic box.
And well, we don't get to see that bit, but yeah.
If only.
But there is that cool moment as well where one of her goons has sort of Christmas Jones, and she goes up to Christmas Jones and looks at her and tells a goon to take her to Renard, and then it's like, oh, pretty thing, had her too, and she's so sexualized, isn't she, the character, which I think is great, and obviously that is her whole character, isn't it? That sort of thing. And then obviously we get, okay, so this is the point where she basically says to Bond, I could have given you the world.
The world is not enough.
Foolish sentiment.
Family motto.
Now, I like it, right? I like it. I know sometimes getting the title in is cheesy, but I think you needed it. I think the throwback to Majesties, I think it worked. And I like it. What do you think?
Yeah. That was Pierce did like to do that, didn't he? He liked to throw in the title of the film every now and then, just as a little nod, you know. Yeah, I like things like that if there's a reason to do it, and when you consider, okay, yeah, it is the name of the film, but also when you go back and you watch Majesties, and there it is on the Bond family crest. There's an actual thing there, you know what I mean? He's not just saying the world is not enough just because it sounds cool and it's the name of the title. That's his family motto. So that is a phrase that he would know, and that's in his mind. You know what I mean? So, and it cements the character as well and who he is and his sort of background and stuff. So yeah, absolutely. No, I like it. Okay, so then we've got, obviously she reveals the torture chair. Bond is sort of put in it. They've got the clasps over his ankles and his wrists and stuff like that. And he basically asks about M. Where's M? And she's like, soon she'll be everywhere. So obviously he knows that M is going to be killed pretty soon. And then, so as an object, I really like the torture chair as well. I think it's a really sort of fascinating and memorable thing to have in a Bond film. Yeah. What do you think? Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, you know, you've got to have a sequence where Bond's tied up somewhere and he's in jeopardy. So this is that moment. And yeah, it's a nice thing that's a bit different, you know. And there is that, again, there's a very sexual way that she does this, which I find very pleasing. Well, the straddling, bloody hell. Exactly. There she is. She's turning the wheel and he's like, oh, and he's like, can barely breathe. That was such a good. That was spot on, mate. Thanks very much. Yeah, so he can barely breathe, and the way she straddles over him, straddles on him while she's doing it, and her face is like an inch from his. It's like, I mean, fucking hell, that would be a way to go, which I wouldn't be gutted with that, you know. No, I mean, top way to go, I think, is always peacefully in your sleep. Yep, that's nice. Go to sleep, and that's you don't want to, you don't want any towering infernos or anything like that. But this, I mean, I could quite happily go that way. Well, yeah, I think why not? You know, give her a call, see if she's up for it. She does say that line, which basically epitomizes her character. I've always had a power over men. Now, this is Renard. This is the other captives, the guards. This is Bond. This is everyone. You can imagine that she had to have known about her beauty and what she could do with it from when she was in a. Well, do you know what I think it is? Because she says that line about how her dad was nothing to M earlier, doesn't she? And that he stole from her mother or something like that. Mm. See, I would imagine that Elektra would have been like a proper sport little daddy's girl, princess type. You know what I mean? But so maybe she was that, especially in his eyes, but she sort of viewed that as a weakness on his part because she could wrap him around her little finger. Well, I mean, that's brilliant right there. That's spot on, and I that really makes sense in terms of the character, that she'd be like that. And and then she basically says, obviously, Bond at this point knows. She tells him that how she's turned Renard, and she's the one that obviously had control over him, and then says that Bond was even easier. So, like, what a put down is that, you know? Yeah, yeah. And Bond's obviously sitting in a precarious position right there. That's right, isn't it? So she says that she asked Renard to hurt her,
in terms of the story, which he couldn't do, and then reveals that takes off her earring and reveals that she sort of mutilated her own ear.
Yeah.
Trying to be a bit like Blofeld, didn't she? She sort of chopped off her earlobe and stuff. And then obviously we got the whole bit about oil is in my family, it runs through my veins, thicker than blood, and nobody can resist me and all that sort of stuff. But you get that point in terms of having that thing that goes into his neck. Obviously she's turning this wheel. We get that sort of metal, what would you call it? I don't know, that sort of sticks out into his neck. That whole idea with the twisting and obviously him being sort of strangled at the same time, I think is, works well.
Yeah.
And you can almost put yourself in that position and, it's not looking good.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like this little bit here, which he says, nobody can resist me. You should have killed me when you had the chance, but you couldn't. Not me, not a woman you've loved. Kisses him, turns the wheel. He says, you meant nothing to me, one last screw. She doesn't like that, does she?
Not at all. No, not one bit. She's basically about to turn the wheel to kill him. And then obviously they hear gunfire and it's Zhukovsky and his mates and they've arrived. And then Mr. Ball's like, oh, boss, it's so good to see you. And he's like, me too. And fires him. Well, I like that because obviously Ball's not a nice guy. So he totally machine guns him down. Totally deserves it, definitely. And then basically Zhukovsky ends up in the same room as Bond and Elektra and sees the situation. Now, this is quite a cool moment. So he obviously sees his nephew's, the captain's cap, doesn't he? And he's like, give it to me. And then Elektra King hides his gun behind it and basically walks towards him and shoots him. And now Bond's obviously not in a good place. And we think Zhukovsky's dead, but he's obviously severely wounded. But he's just enough time to pick up his cane, which is like a gun, which is a really cool throwback to 1954's Casino Royale. So the very first James Bond gadget on screen was a cane gun. And yet here we have it back in 1999.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's in the book as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Isn't it? Because there's that sequence. So I suppose the sequence that they switched out for in the recent film was where they poison him and he runs to the bathroom. But in the book, there's that dude, he puts his walking stick between his butt cheeks, doesn't he? Do you remember? I remember Fleming talking about his Cossacks a lot and that he was going to blow his Cossacks away and then he'd never walk again and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, interesting. I didn't pick up on that. Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool. So we've got this scene and we've got Zhukovsky on the floor and he's holding this cane gun at Elektra and she's like, thinks that he's going to kill her. And he turns to Bond and he gives him that little wink, and he's because Bond's thinking, well, hang on a minute, why are you going to shoot me? And he gives him that little wink. It's all right. Does the shot. He actually shoots and then winks, doesn't he? Yeah. And because it sort of hit the ankle, the wrist clasp, and sort of got it open. But Elektra thinks he was trying to kill Bond. Says, "Oh, he really hated you."
Yeah.
And obviously isn't aware what's happened. And then she comes over, doesn't she? And then Bond sort of kicks her away and breaks free. And then what do you think about this whole moment here? Then we get that cool chase as well.
Yeah. So, mate, this is leading up to a moment I find very difficult to deal with, but at the same time is so very Bond. It's interesting. So obviously we have a little bit of a chase. They're kind of running up the tower. Bond hears M shout for him as he runs past, so he runs back, shoots the lock on the door.
I like that.
That is a nice touch. M's probably scuttling off to find the nearest bathroom. And then they have this little standoff up the top in their little bedroom thing. Now, look at this moment. This is as cold-blooded as it gets. You've got one of the world's most beautiful women stood there in front of him, and Bond's got her at gunpoint. She's totally unarmed, and there she is. And like she's taunting him with it. She's like, "You wouldn't kill me, you'd miss me."
The way that she looks at him as well, look that she gives him, because the radio's right up to her mouth, and she just turns her head slightly, looks at him with those eyes, and thinks, well, she believes in her power, so much, doesn't she?
Absolutely. So he basically tells her to call her men off, and then she clicks on the walkie-talkie, and then tells him to dive. And then without missing a beat, he pulls the trigger, boom, point blank range, she's dead.
Such a
he
good
says,
scene.
I never miss. And it's like, for such a light film, and for such a lighter Bond, this isn't super dark Timothy, this isn't super dark Daniel, this is definitely high adventure, more leaning towards Roger than anybody else Bond. For a moment like that, this for me is almost like when Roger kicks matey off the top of the cliff in the car. Locke, that's it. Kicks Locke's car off the top of the cliff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's exactly the same sort of feel, but probably even more so.
Yeah.
Just because this is like the main villainess, but the main girl, and he's been to, he's obviously slept with her and everything.
Because as in life, we've all been trained, haven't we, that you don't harm a lady. Do you know what I mean? As a man, you don't, you just don't do it. It's not on the menu. You know what I mean? So that makes it extra shocking, isn't it? It's like when you see that point blank range, bang, she's unarmed. That's such a powerful moment, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah. Oh, with that. Well, she even says that line before, doesn't she? It's what is it? It's basically, you wouldn't kill me, you'd miss me. And then obviously follows it up with "I'll never miss." And the fact that M watches it, arrives at the top of the stairs to see Bond shoot an Elektra. Yeah. And that's the first time probably that she's ever seen Bond kill anyone in cold blood. And the fact it's the daughter of her, a close friend who obviously died, sort of thing, makes it all the more sort of important and poignant.
That's it. I remember there's something about that when you. So I remember there's a scene in The Sopranos where it was a long time ago, so I can't remember the exact situation. There's a scene where there's this guy beating up this girl. And I remember watching that and just getting this, I felt really angry just watching it, even though it's obviously acted and all the rest of it. It gave you that feeling, you know what I mean? Just because it's like whenever you've got somebody who's stronger beating on somebody who's defenseless, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's a similar, the wrong comparison, but it's like if you see somebody beating up an animal or something, it's like instantly you just like, you fucking arsehole, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you get that same thing with that kind of situation. So it's a very powerful thing to play with, isn't it? And when it's our hero like that, shooting a woman in cold blood, it could easily bring up those feelings. Yeah. But which is why it's such an interesting scene, Yeah. You've got that, but then at the same time, obviously, so she's the villain, so she's got to die at the end, Yeah. But what a way to go! Now, I thought it was interesting that it was a very clean kill in the sense you don't see any blood at all. She just drops down, and that's it. I think if this film had been made now, you would have seen the sort of blood pool out onto the bed sheets. Do you know what I mean? In some way, or something like that. But it's like an old school movie where the baddies would just drop down in like the 18 and never see any blood.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's the other thing is that I thought some people might think was a bit weird, but I really like was in fact Bond shoots Elektra King just before M arrives. So he shoots her, then M arrives, and then M sees Bond kind of leaning over her and almost caressing her hair. Yeah. And now that's an interesting moment because obviously he's just shot her, he's just killed her, but yet they've shared this past. And then he goes in and caresses her hair, and that even for M to see is sort of quite a big thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's got to be the darkest moment in the Brosnan canon, I think.
100%,
easily.
Yeah, I suppose it's easy for the decision makers. It's like she's in the office. This man's got to die. She's going to send one of the 00s out to go and kill that man, and she never sees it up close. And I suppose, like you say, and with the extra personal connection as well, she's almost like almost like her auntie, isn't she? One of those sort of family friend aunties, I guess. So, what a moment. So now after this, then this is like proper climax battle. Now through the years, man, you get Bond and the villain having a battle in some pretty crazy places. You think of GoldenEye, you only live twice. You got the volcano. You think of GoldenEye, and you've got the the dish and all the rest of it. You think of I don't know,
oil tanker,
I suppose.
Space station.
Yeah, keep coming, go for
it. Mine.
There you go. So this is definitely in that mold, isn't it? So you see, Bond looks out the window. The sub's diving. He does a perfectly executed swan dive. Off he goes. He's obviously remembered that from GoldenEye. He's remembered his swan diving skills. So he kind of jumps down there. just gets to the hatch as it's closing, kicks the dude in the face, and then gets down into the sub. Now, again, this feels very Roger Moore to me. Like, whenever I see this kind of setting where it's all like closed quarters and naval, it just makes me think of, either Spy, or it makes me think of the opening scenes of For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah, that's just
all those kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It has that feel to it. So, yeah, I guess this is the point. So he's with at Christmas, isn't he? Or he finds Christmas in the sub and sort of manages to rescue her. But initially he spies on Renard and men and sees that plutonium rod sort of in the process of being made. He knows that once the rod is finished, that's when obviously shit goes down. But there is that point where it starts to dive, and Bond tells Christmas that they can force it to the surface. Then obviously they can. It will show up on the spy satellite, bring in the Navy, and everything will be all right. Bond then takes over the control room. She takes out a lot of guards. Now, being a naval man, you think that he'd have quite a strong knowledge of submarines. I know this isn't a British submarine, this is a Russian submarine. But rather than bringing the sub to the surface, he sends it into a nosedive straight to the bottom of the Bosphorus.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think of that? Bond being a naval man, do you think surely the controls aren't reversed on a Russian sub compared to a UK sub, or are they? Who knows?
Maybe. See, I look at this like it could be when you go to the continent, Chris, and everybody drives on the wrong side of the road.
This is it.
It could be that. It's like, you push the thing one way for a British sub and it would go up. In a Russian one, it goes the other way. It could so easily be
maybe
that.
that's exactly
that's
what
I'm
it is.
going with.
Yeah,
anyway.
I think I'll go with that as well in that case. But it does make for an interesting set then, doesn't it? Because obviously the sub is normally horizontal. Now it's vertical. You've got people hanging on. You've got things falling down. It's a lot harder to navigate through the sub when it's like that. Obviously, it impacts when it hits the seabed and stuff like that. And then they've got to try and get to the reactor room, haven't they? Because obviously this is where the plutonium rod is entered. This is where Bond has to get to. So we get sort of the water starts to leak in. We get quite a few wet t-shirt sort of scenes of Christmas Jones, which obviously
always a pleasure.
Renard locks himself in the reactor room, doesn't he? So he's got
Yes.
the plutonium rod. He locks himself in there. Now, this is the point where you alluded to earlier, where Bond's like, right, if I get into this tube here, close this, I'll swim out there, you press this when it's on, and then I'll get through there, and then everything will be fine, and I'll let you in there. So you do get quite a lot of that sort of going on, don't you, at this point in time?
Now, tell me this. Is that a torpedo tube he climbs into?
What, are you trying to say it's a bit similar to You Only Live Twice?
I am trying to say it's a bit similar to You Only Live Twice.
Yeah.
It is a torpedo tube, isn't it?
I don't know if it is or not. It could just be, well, yeah, why not? Let's go with it.
Fuck it. Yeah. All right, we've decided.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of holding my breath during this scene.
Oh, I did that as well.
Do you do that whenever anybody's
all of them.
underwater and they don't have any air? I hold my
Always.
breath to see if I can last.
Always. This is a tricky one as well.
It is. And I tell you what, it's very claustrophobic as well, because if you think about it, like there's that scene where the water's coming up and he's just taking the last few breaths before it goes, and it goes above, and then he's locked in this thing completely submerged, and then boom, out he goes. Then he swims around to go into the other one, and then he's in there just waiting for the water
it's like, come on, Christmas.
Yeah, exactly, waiting for that to go. So it's a double whammy of like claustrophobic. It's like, oh man, it just makes your skin tingle a little bit. It's just how nasty that is. But
she does her job on Christmas, doesn't she?
Yeah,
I think
she
she gets hit by the water because she was about to touch it, and then eventually gets Bond obviously manages then to get into the reactor room. So obviously this is the climax. This is Bond versus the main villain. Okay, this is
is he the main villain?
Well,
though?
okay,
So this is
not
the thing,
actually.
right?
No, he's
so
not.
here's my question to you, right? We have what is definitely the darkest moment in the film, and for me, one of the most memorable Bond moments of seeing Bond kill in cold blood, point blank range, easily one of the world's most beautiful women, which does make it even worse.
Yeah.
If it was, if he did that to Renard, we wouldn't really give a shit. But because it's her, it makes it all the more a special moment. So we've now learned she's the real sort of mastermind behind this, and the puppet master. And then now we go to Renard, who's like the it's mop up time, right? We've got to stop him from doing this now. Do you think that should have been reversed?
In terms of,
in the sense that we have the fight with Renard,
Yeah.
Bond's all fucked up, and then maybe he goes to rescue M, and
Yeah.
that's where the Elektra scene happens. Obviously she
Interesting.
wouldn't tell her men to dive because that would have been done. It would have been another reason he'd have had to shoot her. But do you think that would have been the better way to go?
I'm not entirely sure, because if you think about it, okay, so Elektra's definitely the main villain. If we say Renard is the henchman, then think of Live and Let Die. Mr. Big is gone, he's got to fight Tee-Hee. Scaramanga's gone, he's got to fight Knick-Knack.
That's a fair point.
So there's quite a few times where the main villain has been dispatched, but yet he's still got to sort of go up against the main henchman or whatever. So if you look at it from that aspect, I think it's fine. And equally, I mean, I do miss Elektra. Once she's sort of gone from the film, it is a shame because she's such a cool character, such a good character. But I think it does work that way around. I'm just trying to picture it the other way around.
It's not that it doesn't work, but I do wonder whether it would the peril or the impact would be higher going that way around. Because at the end of the day, we now know Elektra's gone. We now know M is safe, and all what he's got to do is stop Istanbul from blowing up and causing everybody else dying. But I wonder whether, if the peril had been switched over, so because we all know he's going to rescue everyone in Istanbul's not going to blow up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So get that one done first, but then there's a real personal peril of like, shit, I've got to go and make sure M's okay. And then there could have been some real tension where M is like, kind of like happens in Skyfall, I guess. Like she's a second from dying, and then that's where Bond appears and saves her.
You know what? That's a really interesting point, and I think it could have worked like that. I think now I'm thinking about it. I really like that. I think because then you still got the anticipation of what's going to happen with Elektra, haven't you? I really like that. The thing I have to sort of say, which I'm a little bit disappointed in, is obviously Renard's not a large man in terms of stature, and the battle between the two of them. Obviously, you want a really good, hard-hitting fight. You're thinking, from Russia of Love, Spy Love, all of these sort of fights we've had. Think of GoldenEye, amazing fist fight between two. And here, I know in terms of the set, it's probably quite difficult to have that sort of fight, but for me, is very underwhelming fight between Bond and Renard, which is something of a shame, I think.
Yes, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think when you think of, I think Brosnan's best fight is versus Trevelyan.
Easily.
Like that. Yeah. That is a real hard hitting fight. It really is great, and it's largely it is the two of them. It is Pierce and Sean Bean. And that was a brilliant fight sequence, and I feel like we needed something like that here. But this is what I would call almost like a WWF fight, or WWE these days. It's like when they're in the ring and somebody gets hit over the head and they're lying on the floor of the ring, and then the other guy turns around and he's like jostling the crowd and being like, yeah, I'm the best or whatever. And then the other guy slowly gets up and then he turns around at the last minute and gets a kick in the face or whatever. There's a lot of that in this sequence, you know what I mean? Whereas I feel like in that closed space and with those bars, I feel like you could have choreographed a really solid, like brutal and frantic fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also play up on something we mentioned last time, which is the whole thing of Renard not feeling pain, and perhaps
that is underused, man. I feel it really is underused.
Yeah.
It was going to be Stamper, that wasn't it?
Exactly.
His was the pain and pleasure reversed, wasn't it? So it's similar.
Where we said we had that brilliant idea of baking him a cupcake and making him your best mate, and then he'd
exactly. Like, oh no! Yeah, absolutely. That's an easy one to get around when you think about it, I suppose. But with this one, the man who feels no pain, I feel like we should really have seen that it put to good use in this fight, where like Bond is just getting battered and bruised and flung left, right, and center, and the other dude is just relentless. You know?
There is a moment,
or like we were saying before in the bunker sequence where we were saying about when Bond's got him at gunpoint, where Bond is battering him, and it's just like he's just taking it and keeps coming. You know, I feel like we if we didn't get it there, we definitely needed it here, and we just sort of didn't really.
No, there is one small moment where Bond sweep kicks him. I don't know if it's that particular point or just after that, and Renard falls onto one of those bars between his legs, and you think for any normal person, you would have felt it, definitely. Yeah. But really, we needed more, because you never felt Bond was in peril.
No.
And it's a shame, because with a character that has that backstory, you really could have worked that into the fight. And like like we mentioned last time as well, Renard doing something that would hurt himself but hurt Bond at the same time, in terms of, you know, he doesn't mind. Obviously, he can't feel pain, but it's going to hurt Bond as well.
Exactly.
And something
it's
that.
Like those burning rocks.
Yeah.
It's like pick one of those up and jam it in Bond's face or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's something like that. Yeah. It's like giving Jaws his teeth and then he never bites anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or Odd Job's hat and he never fucking chucks it at anybody. I feel like that's such a strong feature of a villain. It's such a shame that it never really gets used.
No,
you know?
I think that's might be one of the biggest sort of disappointments, because there's so many interesting parts to this particular story. I think that's one that I think it's a shame, because they definitely could have done more. And he's got his little one-liner, hasn't he? Welcome to my nuclear family. Are you a fan of that one, or?
It's all right.
It's all right. Not too bad. And fair play to Christmas Jones. At one point, she tries to get involved, doesn't she, and help Bond, and receives like an elbow in her face for her effort and stuff like that. So it's good that she's not just sitting there screaming his name or something like that. But there is that point though where they kind of just got each other around the throat. It's very, very much WWE, as you were saying. And Bond says to him, "Are you really going to commit suicide for her?" And he's like, "You forget, I'm already dead." Bond's like, "Haven't you heard? So is she." And that's good, but then would Renard, I mean, he sort of thinks Bond's lying, doesn't he? That's the thing. Because if he totally believes she was dead, would he still go through with the plan? Because that's basically what is.
I suppose he's not got a whole lot of time to sort of think about it. It's not like he's immediately going to go, "Oh well, might as well go home." It's like, right then, I'm going to make sure this happens or whatever. I don't know. It's a funny one. I suppose having her death happen before this is an opportunity for Bond to say that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It is a funny one. Like I feel like Renard is just so underused in so many ways, you know?
Yeah. I think if they just played up on that sort of no pain side of things a lot more, because also it has to be said, in this particular fight, Bond is pretty shit, to be honest. Like, Renard's not a big fellow, and he basically ends up beating on Bond and locking him in this little chamber, and it's only through like luck, coincidence, that Bond actually wins it, because obviously that sort of air pressure hose or whatever it is flies off, and then Bond sort of sees it flailing around, and ultimately that's how he kills Renard, isn't it? He puts this air pressure hose back on, presses a button, which, you know, he obviously knows what that is, and then sends that control rod flying out into Renard.
Well, I tell you what that is that we often like, isn't it? That is firmly hoisted by his own petard, isn't it? He's got his petard and he's hoisting on it.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It is. But I still think it could have been done a better way.
So go on then.
Yeah.
What's the solution to this, right? So do you like the setting of a vertical submarine that's crashed into the base of to the seafloor?
I think it's interesting, but ultimately not that exciting.
So do you think the setting works, but if you'd have had a better fight, that would have solved it? That would have made it better? Or would you have been like, let's do something completely different?
I think a better fight would have made the scene better, but I think personally, I would have come up with a different sort of setting rather than that. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think I do like how a submarine that's gone vertical So it's like, it's not just a fight on a submarine. It's a submarine where the sort of laws of the thing have changed. So it's like everybody's hanging on things and having to climb and all the rest of it. So I like that idea. I'm not opposed to that idea at all. I just feel like it's a bit of a lackluster climax for a dude who feels no pain. And it's not what I want is, I want a new GoldenEye fight between Renard and Bond in that closed quarter area.
Definitely. Well, when you're in, like you said, in that confined space, you could really do some damage. And being on top of the pipe, just seeing people sort of falling and almost pinballing between those pipes, and but over and over again, and stuff like that. Like, imagine Bond being the one who overpowers Renard, but Renard is just relentless. He keeps getting up, keeps coming back, grabbing Bond, and almost reversing how the fight is, because it's Bond who's trying to stop Renard. But if you kind of reverse that and have Bond overpowering Renard and trying to pull out the rod, but Renard is so relentless, he keeps on getting at Bond and coming back and back. I think that way would have been a better way to have done that fight, I think. But Bond does get his little one-liner in when what does he say to him? Oh, she's waiting for you, and then presses button, and obviously the thing goes away.
Do you think he needed some more comedy in that one line? Do you think it would be more like here's a real gut punch, boom, or something like that? That wasn't a good one either, I will be honest. But I'm just riffing here, trying to come up with something.
I guess I do like it. There's a bit more serious in terms of the whole storyline with Elektra is the serious part of this film, isn't it? It's so it does make that a bit more involved. But it's just a shame that I don't think the fight was quite up to par, really.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I'm in full agreement with that. So then obviously the rod comes out, gets Renard in the belly. I feel like at the very least get it to smack him in the head. Do you know what I mean? That's more like, I feel like the belly blow wasn't visually pleasing enough for me. Get him in the ball bag or get him in the head.
Ball bag would have been good.
That. So there we go. So Bond saves the day. We get a nice little bit up from Bond, but because it's flooded, it's all right. Even if it blows up, it's okay. Everybody at home got that? All right, brilliant. Now we can escape. And then obviously out they go, and they swim for the surface, obviously making sure to exhale all the way up.
Of course.
And then there's another very, very Roger Moore moment where they wave to the passing tourist boat, and they all wave back.
I like that. I really like that.
It reminds me of, we're with the economy tour.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when I watched it.
It's nice. Now,
yes,
I am very, very, very pleased with how this film ends. Very pleased with it, right? So obviously we're back to the the MI6 castle, and they're searching for Bond, and we cut to Christmas, and Bond sitting on the sort of balcony there, drinking the champagne, overlooking the Bosphorus.
Lovely.
Fireworks. Always wanted to have Christmas in Turkey and all that stuff. Very nice. How do you feel about that as a send-off for Bond and Christmas as a last scene? I tell you what it reminds me of.
Yeah, go on.
I tell you what it reminds me of. It's a bit License to Killy.
Oh, I
with
see.
the winking fish. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, with that particular bit,
Well, in the sense that, like, how they end up in the pool and they do the cheesy line together, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah.
It's that ending here, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I mean, we were very rough on poor old Christmas last time round. Have you warmed to her by this point, or not at all?
In all honesty, no. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's. I do like the whole thing that's going on with MI6. I like R's searching for them. They find the car, and then R said, "Right, we'll find them through body heat," and it shows up orange. And they obviously find them, and then redder. Yeah. And that whole moment is really good. I think they're sitting on the balcony. It is a Brosnan thing. It's a very much in the Brosnan style, I think, and suits this film. I haven't got much time for Christmas, so I suppose I'm not too engaged really at this point.
So at this point, him and Christmas haven't got it on, have they?
No.
So this is it. So it's I always wanted to have Christmas in Turkey, and then isn't it time you unwrapped your present and all that? And it's like
this. I tell you what this is.
Go on.
This is Die Another Day dialogue pre Die Another Day.
Maybe you're right there. Yeah.
I really think it is.
There is a bit of a cringe fest happening at the end there. But I do like the bit with the heat scanner thing.
Yeah, that's
with
cool.
the body heat. What I find very interesting though is when they first lock in on Bond and they are just lying on top of each other perfectly.
Yeah, you think it's just one person,
still,
yeah.
on top of each other, arms down by their sides.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done that position before. Chris, have you?
Not to my knowledge, no. Unless they were playing an interesting game. Which,
if you were in the room with them at that time, it would be like, what are you two doing exactly? That is not the best position to get the job done.
No.
But yeah, and then obviously you see Christmas's, legs, I shall say, and then 007. And I love all this stuff. I love all that. I love Bond being in the arms of a beautiful lady, and then all of a sudden, M and maybe General Gogol is there or something, and it's, you know what I mean? Yeah. I love that stuff. Going back to the very beginning, Bond, in the boat with Honey, and then Felix shows up and all the rest of it. I love that ending for Bond. It's been done again and again and again, and I miss it. I really do miss it, and I want that again soon. If this is how No Time to Die ends, Bond in an orange dinghy in the middle of nowhere or something like that, or something.
I've seen the still picture. I think we're on the right track. Yeah.
I want that, and I love it. And to me, this just confirms how leaning towards the Roger period this film is, to finish it like this. This is just like Moonraker ending, isn't it? At the end of the day,
definitely. And I do like the old line, it must have been a premature form of the Millennium Bug that R says. He obviously shuts down the computer, and that whole bit, I mean, it's just fun, isn't it? The MI6 bit is good fun, really good fun. But then we do have that final scene, and that final line or two. Hit me with it, Tom. What is that line, and what are your thoughts on it?
Okay, so Bond says, I was wrong about you.
Yeah? How so?
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
Boom, boom.
Oh, yes! I fucking love that. I really do. Right? I know. I will put my hands up and I will say, I fully admit, that's the only reason she's called Christmas is because they came up with that joke. But I will counter that. And I'll say that's the only reason they called him C, Inspector, is because they had the "we know what C stands for" joke. Yeah. And that's okay. If you've got a joke like that, go with it. I remember laughing out loud when I saw that for the first time in 1999. And I remember there was a dude sitting behind me who proper had a burst out belly laugh from it as well. Yeah. Wherever he is today. God bless you, mate. I love it. I love it. But I also get the people who aren't such a fan. Where do you land?
Whenever you hear it, particularly obviously in the cinema, I think you get an equal split between those that just piss themselves laughing and those that groan so much their stomach hurts. Yeah. And you definitely get that divide.
Well, do you know what, though? For me, this is more of a risque joke. You know what I mean? This wouldn't have got past the censors in Roger's time. Do you know what I mean? No. It's like, I thought Christmas only comes once a year. Like, that's a naughty joke, isn't it? You know what I mean? By the standards of days gone by. Definitely, that wouldn't.
But then you say that, but the jokes in Rogers can be heading that way. It's just that for people that are young, generally speaking, they don't know about it, so it goes over their head. Yeah. So you get so many jokes, like so many innuendos, which when we were young, it's like obviously we didn't have a clue what it meant, and then suddenly you're like, oh, okay.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah,
those are the best ones. It's like sometimes when you grew up watching. Like you watch something like, I don't know, The Simpsons, for example.
What jokes do you get on there?
But do you know what I mean? Like there is a level of adult humor in something like that, where it's obviously a show generally for kids, but at the same time, there's a level in there that you wouldn't get as a kid. But then you rewatch it as an adult, and there's going to be some jokes that you're like, oh, I get that now. And like early Bond is littered with that stuff, absolutely 100% that you wouldn't get as a kid, but you as an adult. And yeah, obviously this one fits into that box as well. But yeah, where do you land on it? Do you love this line? Do you hate it?
I wouldn't remove it. I'd definitely keep it in there because it is part of the film, isn't it? And I do remember the first time. I think I knew it was coming because excuse the pun. Because I think it was people had heard about it or something. Yeah. So prior to watching the film, I think that whole thing had been released, or some people knew about it, and I was definitely one of them. So it wasn't a shock to me. And I do remember sort of still having a little bit of a giggle about it. But I mean, you can't take it out, can you? Because it's part of the film. It is what
I
it
love
is.
it. I proper love it.
Stick it in there. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I do like the fact that after that we get a good Bond theme kicking in, and I like that seeding into the end titles like that. It's
nice.
Really cool. Yeah.
Go on then, round it up for me, Chris.
Okay.
Pierce's third Bond.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, just briefly on the final third. If I had to put the thirds in order, I'd go first third, second third. If that makes sense. I think it's a step up from the second act, step up from the middle third. There are moments that I really enjoy, and moments that perhaps I think have improvement. Looking at the overall film, the standout bits for me, I think the number one standout bit is Elektra King. For me, she makes this film. On any level that this film is good, it's down to the character of Elektra King, Sophie Marceau. Outstanding cast, brilliant portrayal, really well handled in terms of the character, the power, the struggle, the story. The dialogue, I think, is great between her and Bond and her and Renard. And that whole reverse Stockholm syndrome comes across brilliantly. So I've got so much time for Elektra King. She's definitely the best thing about the film.
Yeah.
I think other standout moments, the pre-title sequence, I think is fantastic. That's the first time we'd seen London like that for God knows how long. And got an amazing boat chase. That's brilliant. I love seeing the MI6 in the castle in Scotland. I think that's fantastic. There are. I think the story is really original and really good in terms of the kidnap, the sort of double twist, her becoming the main villain and Renard the kind of henchman, and that's all great. I think where potentially it lets itself down, certain set pieces, I'm thinking like the bunker and one or two other sort of scenes, but is also it's not fleshing out the character of Renard to its full potential. Because I think if that character was the same level as Elektra King's, it would be top-notch stuff. I'm thinking if you're thinking of Zorin and Mayday, obviously it's different, but Zorin's character is brilliant and Mayday's character is brilliant. Here, Elektra King's character is brilliant, and I just wish that for me, the Renard's character was at the same level, because I think it would knock this film up by easily a couple of sort of ranks if that were the case.
Yeah, there's a lot to chew on there, but I think this one almost was Pierce's Goldfinger. It almost was the one that was like, boom, that's where they've got it right. You know what I mean? When you look at that boat chase at the beginning, that is an all-time classic boat chase. Goes in all the trailers. Brilliant. Amazing. You're absolutely right. I think the best thing about this film is Elektra. Casting is perfect. It's not like, I could have seen somebody else doing that role a little bit better. None of that. She is absolutely made for that role, and she's absolutely perfect in it as well. And I do like the twist. I like that. That's a new angle that we've not really seen before. That whole thing of her becoming the main. The formula is usually you get a couple of Bond girls, one of them dies early, one of them's bad and turns good at the end. But that's not what this is here. This is something that's new, and I like it. And she's absolutely brilliant. I think where it gets let down for me is in some, I guess, the three action sequences in the second half of the film. You've got the maybe even the four actually. You've got the bunker. You've got the pipeline thing on the pig. You've got the buzzsaw helicopters, and then you've got the upturned submarine. Yeah. I don't think any of them are that great. No. Do you know what I mean? They're all like okay action sequences, but there's nothing there that's like, whoa, that fucking boat chase at the beginning, amazing. That's a great boat chase, and I love it. The rest of the action sequences, I feel they're just a little bit middle of the road for me. It
is a shame because it's so strong with Elektra, and Renard is still a decent character, and the backstory and the idea was brilliant. Perhaps that could have been a bit stronger. And then you got M's kidnapping, which I think is great. It's the first proper time that we've seen M in such a big role. Yeah. And I think, obviously, like we mentioned, sort of taken from previous idea, Colonel Sun and all that. So I think that's really good. but like you said, the action scenes, it's a shame because like Pre-Title is such a banger, and then like the Parahawk one wasn't too bad. I think that it definitely had its moments, but the other ones
it was okay. Again, it was okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it was amazing.
No.
Even if you look at For Your Eyes Only in that ski chase, that's a great fucking ski chase, man. That's
Definitely.
really thrilling, and that's up there with the best of them. That's
Yeah.
up there with Majesty's. There's some great stuff in there, and even at that stage of the game where it's like, that's the first time where Roger's really starting to sort of like, you can see he's aged a bit. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like Live and Let Die through to Moonraker, it's almost like that's the same dude all the way through. And then For Your Eyes Only, you can see he's moved on in years a little bit. So a bit like when you see Connery in Diamonds, you know what I mean? He's clearly a bit older in that one, So yeah, so I think I feel like if they'd just had another 6 months in the writing room, just to kind of switch some things around a little bit and put more attention elsewhere and just freshen up those action sequences a bit. Like, I feel like maybe the buzzsaw helicopters, as kind of unique as that is, I'm not sure it's that exciting. You know what I mean? And it is. I think that's where it gets let down.
You never really feel Bond is in peril, do you? That's the thing. I mean, like I said, I watched Casino again recently. Obviously, it's really totally different, but that parkour scene is just so incredible. And it's just Bond, he gets hurt. And I know Brosnan's Bond doesn't really get hurt, but you want him to at least be in a situation where you think something might happen.
Yeah.
And I think they don't seem to quite do that in the other action scenes.
Another key thing I think that does let it down, bless her heart, Christmas Jones.
Yeah, we have to mention it, don't we?
To be honest, like we said this before, is like if you stuck Denise Richards in an episode of Baywatch or something like that, one of those shows, she fits like in that, like in hand in glove. Like that's what she's meant for, With this, I just don't get that casting, I feel like, is there anybody that you would have cast in that role? Comes to mind?
Around that sort of time, I'm just trying to think. What we're talking, late 90s. Who was around late 90s? I mean, it's got to have been other choices.
Do you know, if you didn't have her for Tomorrow Never Dies, for Paris Carver?
Terry Hatcher?
No, the original Paris Carver that Pierce wanted. Do you remember?
See, Bellucci.
Monica Bellucci.
She would have been a bang up for either of those. Paris Carver, obviously a small role, a bit too similar to kind of like the Spectre, I guess.
Yeah.
But in And then imagine if you had two women of that caliber, two actresses of that caliber going off one another. That could have been
maybe though, because I feel like Bellucci could have also been in the running for Elektra King. She's that same super seductive type, isn't she?
Maybe
maybe there's too much of a match there. But I feel like, I don't know, it's even if you went with an unknown, I think the fact that she's sort of like a cocky, brash American doesn't help either.
No.
If you look at Tiffany Case, I think she's great, at least in the first part of the film, when she's sort of cocky and she's got all the wigs on and she's a no-nonsense character. Changes a bit towards the end, obviously. But I think that really works. Christmas Jones is that sort of big, brash American, but at the same time, just a bit sort of like, I don't know.
There's not much to her character, is there? She says a lot of dialogue around the whole nuclear thing and helps Bond out with disarming the bomb, or potentially was going to disarm the bomb. But in terms of her character, we don't know much about her. We don't know what she's into, and we don't,
and
it's not fleshed out.
She's got that sort of video game Lara Croft vibe about her, isn't she? Especially when we first see her. I
think the casting, like someone we mentioned before, the FHM Top 100, the casting to me must have been, this will bring in the punters. We've got one of the FHM Top 100. This is what people want to see. Whereas really, we just want to see bloody good actresses.
Yeah, I suppose that could be for any younger listeners. The FHM Hot 100 was a big deal at the time, wasn't it? I remember every year that magazine would come out, and it was just basically a list of
every guy in the UK had it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It was just a list of the 100 hottest women that year. I don't even know whether that would fly in this day and age. Do they even make FHM anymore? Is that still a thing?
I doubt it.
But Yeah, so she was always in the top 10. Halle Berry was always in the top 10. You know, it was very much pick and choose from that list. But yeah, it's a shame really, because I think this had the seeds of greatness in it, this film. It really did. And there's just some of those things that kind of let it down. When you have the recipe of Elektra King there and that actress in the role, that is the recipe for an all-time classic Bond girl. And I consider her to be that.
Yeah.
But in the general populace, she's obviously not like a Pussy Galore or anybody like that in terms of the general public's knowledge. They probably wouldn't even recognize Elektra King as a Bond villain's name, would they?
No.
Which is a real shame. Because, I think as a character, she's
right up there, man. And the fact she is like a female head villainess, I think is fantastic. You know, I'd like to see more of them, to be honest.
Well, I tell you what, let's throw that out to the JBR family. How would you, because like we said before, I don't think anybody has ever said that Christmas Jones is their favourite Bond girl.
No.
So I feel like that's a general. There are people going to be listening to this being like, you're being too harsh. I love The World Is Not Enough. And so do I. I love it. It's one of my favourite pieces to put on. And it's one of the ones I'll put on.
It's a lot of fun. As we said, it's a lot of fun to watch.
It is a lot of fun.
Really good fun film.
I will probably, if I'm going to put a Pierce on, it will always be GoldenEye first. But probably my second one would probably be this one. I do love this film a lot. There's a lot to really love about it. But I think probably most of us are all in agreement about Christmas Jones. So let's throw that out to the JBL family. What would you fix Christmas Jones? Do you think she's all right as she is? Do you think we're being overly critical? Or do you have any ideas for who you would cast in that role or how you would switch that around? Let us know on the old, underneath the post on the socials there.
What about Gillian Anderson?
All right, that was prime.
That was around that sort of time.
Do you know what?
It?
She was the thinking man's woman back in the day. I remember when she was on the cover of FHM, I'm pretty sure that was the headline, that she was the thinking man's, totty. Yeah. So that's a good call.
But she's a really good actress and she looks great and obviously was big at that time with X-Files and all that and FHM. Yeah. So maybe that was the alternative that they missed out on.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. That's a good call. All right, we'll turn over to the JBL family and see what they think. And we will also do that next week because it is time for the 90-second reviews of The World Is Not Enough. So everybody at home, especially if there are any new listeners out there, go over to jamesbondradio.com, go over to the right-hand side of the page and you'll see a little button that says send a voicemail. Click that and through your computer or your phone, you can leave us a 90-second voicemail. Give us your review of The World Is Not Enough, what you liked, what you didn't like, all of it. We want to hear the whole lot. So as long as you can fit it into 90 seconds.
Not everyone can. So
not everyone can, indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Call.
Unless you're Jack Lugo. Do you remember? I always mentioned it because it makes me laugh so much. Whichever film it was, he crammed about a 5 to 10 minute review into 90 seconds at lightning speed. I was very impressed with him. It was great. Yeah. And it was just as he finished, it beeped as well. It was great. We salute you, Jack. Yes. All right. So that wraps up our coverage of The World Is Not Enough. Now, Chris, this begs the question now. Mm-hmm. You've obviously come back to help us out with the film reviews.
I have.
What are your thoughts about JBR moving forward? Are you going to come back and help out with some more movie reviews or what? What's going on?
Well, once you have a taste of adventure, you just want to keep going, don't you? So I think if everything works out, that it will be movie reviews and potentially more.
All right.
Back
Very
in the hot
nice.
seat.
All right. So we'll be seeing more of your ugly mug on JBR moving forward.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. If you're going to be back to take care of the movie reviews, I would like to announce my retirement from JBR because the next film review, barring No Time to Die, obviously, is Die Another Day. So I will leave that in your hands, mate, and I will enjoy that as a fan from home.
Right.
And,
I see.
And that'll make me very happy. What do you think about that?
Well, I know what I think, but I think the listeners might not be too happy about that one. I'm really looking forward to that, actually. Another day review. It's been a long time coming. I'm actually really looking forward to the listener reviews because obviously last time we reviewed Tomorrow Never Dies must have been, a year ago or something, or maybe even more than a year
It's been
ago.
over a year. Over a year since our last film review.
So, yeah, it'd be great to hear from the listeners again for Twine. But, Die Another Day, man, it's going to be an interesting one. You know what? I'm kind of quietly confident that I can make you see certain things in a different light. Or not me personally, but the film.
All right.
But we'll see.
I'm hopeful. Do you know what would be lovely is if I see it in a completely fresh light. I've got a brand new Bond film to watch that I've only ever seen twice, and I can barely remember most of it. But there we go. I suppose we should say that our annual birthday episodes are going to be a little bit later than usual because
it's normally the 5th of February.
It was because our first ever episode was the 007th of February 2014. And so around that date every year we usually do our birthday episodes where we invite some listeners on. So obviously because we knocked out The World Is Not Enough, we'll do that sort of in March basically, so it'll be a little bit later than then. Dude, just around the corner, No Time to Die. So there's plenty of action to be.
Cannot wait for that. I really wonder how little I'm going to find out between now and.
I hope you stay under the radar, man. It'll be good if you can go in there and not know anything. Again, having seen the trailer, I'm still in the dark about a lot of things.
That's good.
So that's a very good thing. All right, then, everybody, make sure you get your reviews in. Look out very soon on the JBR website and in the social medias for the call for the annual birthday episodes. You'll just pop a comment over on the website, and we'll pull you out of the hat, and you can come on the show and chat to us for the birthday episodes. They'll be coming up soon. But for right now, leave us your World Is Not Enough reviews, 90-second reviews through the website, and we'll look forward to hearing them. And that will be next week's episode, so we can hear what the JBR family think of Pierce's third Bond. All right, that's about it for today. Until next time, I've been Tom Sears.
I've been Chris Wright.
And JBR will return with The World Is Not Enough 90-second reviews. We'll see you then, everybody. Bye!
Hope you enjoyed the show. Good night.